Welcome back to the deep dive. This time, we're diving into hydroponics.
Hydroponics.
You got it.
Yeah.
You've sent us a ton of research on this, so we know you're not messing around.
Yeah.
You want to fully understand this whole way of farming,
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
and you've come to the right place.
Absolutely.
Get ready to explore hydroponics from its environmental impact to how it could totally change food.
We're talking big changes.
You know me,
Mm-hmm.
I love to learn new things,
Always.
but this hydroponics thing, this feels different.
How so?
Like, are we really talking about a future where farms look more like labs than dirt fields?
It's a fascinating possibility.
Where you can grow a tomato in the middle of the desert? I've got so many questions.
Well, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Really?
What's really fascinating is that we're not just talking about futuristic farming here.
Okay.
This deep dive into your research is really about understanding if hydroponics can handle the biggest challenges facing our planet.
Like what?
Think about it. More people on the planet every day, fewer resources to go around,
Yeah.
and that pressing need to find more sustainable ways to grow food.
It's a lot.
It is.
Okay, so you sent over some pretty heavy research about how conventional agriculture impacts the environment.
Yeah, some eye-opening stuff.
I mean, I knew things weren't great, but then I saw that agriculture uses 70% of the world's fresh water.
70%.
That's wild. 70%. We have to do better.
I think we can all agree on that.
So how does hydroponics fit in?
That's precisely where hydroponics comes into play.
Okay.
While it's not a perfect solution, the research you gathered suggests it could really reduce how agriculture impacts the environment.
For example,
For example, one study from Energy's 2023 shows that hydroponics could mean using up to 90% less land for certain crops compared to how we farm now.
90%.
90%.
So basically, we could grow the same amount of food on 110th of the land.
Exactly. That's huge,
Yeah.
especially when you think about deforestation, habitat loss, and just the competition for land.
It's a big deal.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about saving space.
Right.
That same research also says that hydroponic lettuce can yield 11 times more than what you'd get from traditional farming on the same amount of land.
11 times. We're talking about a potential agricultural revolution.
That's amazing.
That is.
And let's not forget about the pesticides and herbicides used in traditional farming.
Right.
Hydroponics uses controlled environments, which can drastically reduce the need for all those chemicals.
Absolutely. That's a win-win for our health and the environment.
So less pesticides means less bad stuff in our water and soil.
Exactly.
Plus, it's safer for pollinators, like bees.
Which are crucial for a healthy ecosystem.
Okay, enough about lettuce.
What else is there?
Let's talk tomatoes.
Everybody loves a good tomato.
Exactly. Who doesn't love a juicy, vine-ripened tomato?
They're the best.
I found this article from Hydroponic Systems that says hydroponic tomatoes need 3 times less water than regular tomatoes.
3 times less.
3 times. And get this, you can grow them year-round, practically anywhere, even in a concrete jungle like New York City.
Now that's convenient.
Right.
But those tomatoes might need a little extra energy to really thrive.
Really?
The Energy's 2023 study we talked about earlier says that hydroponic tomatoes could need up to 5 times more energy than traditional methods.
Wow, 5 times.
Of course, this all depends on where you are, what kind of hydroponic setup you're using, and your energy sources.
It's complicated.
It's a complex equation.
And this is where it gets really interesting to me.
Okay, tell me more.
This paper on cannabis cultivation, talk about a hot topic, shows how much energy use can change depending on whether you're growing indoors or outdoors.
Indoor versus outdoor is a big factor.
And the water you save with indoor hydroponics, mind-blowing.
It can be significant.
It really makes you think about how adaptable this technology is.
It does. It
Okay.
can be tailored to different environments and needs, which is a testament to its versatility.
But you're right, it's not a magic solution.
Exactly.
We can't just assume it'll fix everything.
It highlights how important careful planning and resource management are for sustainable hydroponic farming.
This is what I love about these deep dives.
That's that.
We start with a simple question about hydroponics, and suddenly we're thinking about the future of food, the environment, the economics of it all.
It really expands your perspective.
Speaking of economics, you found some research about the cost of traditional and hydroponic farming. And wow, the numbers really jumped out at me.
Yeah, setting up a hydroponic farm is no small feat financially.
It's a whole different ballgame than just planting seeds in the ground, right?
Exactly. You've got the infrastructure, the technology, the energy costs we talked about.
But then you have to think long term.
That's key.
This paper by Souza Toesca Jimenez and Bernardo from Land Use Policy back in 2019 says that while hydroponics costs a lot upfront, It can actually be a better financial choice over time, especially for certain crops and in certain places.
I've seen similar findings.
They point out how hydroponics often leads to bigger harvests, faster growth cycles, and, like we talked about, fewer pesticides.
All of that impacts a farmer's bottom line.
And don't forget, year-round production because of those controlled environments.
Right, a potential game changer for farmers with shorter growing seasons.
Plus, we can't ignore the environmental savings.
Definitely, those are becoming a bigger part of the true cost of food.
But some of the research you sent, like this one from Energy's 2023, suggests that the energy hydroponics needs, especially for heating and cooling those indoor farms, could be a limiting factor.
That's a valid concern, and this paper breaks it down really well.
How so?
It looks at the energy consumption of different hydroponic systems and points out that if they relied too much on fossil fuels, it could negate some of the environmental benefits.
So we need to find cleaner energy sources.
Exactly, which is why there's so much research on using renewables like solar and wind power for these farms.
Can you imagine? Talk about a win-win.
Now that's a feature I can get behind.
And this study about cannabis cultivation really showed how much energy indoor farming uses in general.
It's more than people realize.
Lighting, ventilation, temperature control, it adds up fast.
It does.
Speaking of cannabis, did you know that according to the Cannabis Business Times, 72% of cannabis growers are already keeping detailed data on their crops? That's next-level data-driven agriculture.
That's incredible.
Makes sense though, right?
Right.
With the right data, growers can fine-tune their systems, use their resources better, and improve both their yields and profits.
It's like having a constant feedback loop telling you what your plants need.
It's amazing.
It is.
But all this technology and data analysis, you need some serious expertise for that, right?
It's a different skill set for sure.
This hydroponics manual from the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture really stresses how important technical know-how is.
And for good reason.
It's not as easy as just tossing some seeds in the ground and hoping for the best.
Definitely not.
Hydroponics needs a solid understanding of plant science, nutrient solutions, water chemistry. It's like engineering. We're not just playing in the dirt here.
It's a whole different ball game.
And that's not something every farmer has or knows, right?
At least not yet.
But there's this research paper you sent about how easy it is to adopt and integrate this technology. And it makes a really interesting point.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What does it say?
Well, this research says that as hydroponic systems get easier to use, and with more online resources and support networks, we could see this technology become available to way more people.
It's an interesting thought.
It won't just be for expert farmers anymore.
Right.
Imagine community gardens using hydroponics, or people growing fresh food in their apartments.
It's a compelling idea.
We're talking about bringing food production back to our cities and communities.
Exactly. Changing how we think about where our food comes from.
And it gets even more interesting when you look at this study from Energy's 2023 about comparing hydroponics to aquaponics and aquaculture.
Now, those are some terms that might need a little explaining.
Okay, you got me thinking about fish now.
Why not?
You know, I love a good analogy.
Hit me with it.
Break it down for me.
Yeah.
What's the difference between all these tectonics and cultures?
Well, we've been talking about hydroponics, growing plants in a nutrient-rich water solution, right?
Right.
Aquaponics takes it a step further and brings in fish farming.
Fish farming.
Basically, the fish waste gives nutrients to the plants, and the plants clean the water for the fish.
So it's like a mini ecosystem.
Exactly, a self-sustaining loop.
And aquaculture is just fish farming on its own.
Exactly, raising fish in controlled environments like tanks or ponds.
Got it.
But what I find so fascinating about this research is that it suggests we should compare all these different methods, hydroponics, aquaponics, and aquaculture, to see which is the most sustainable, efficient, and economically viable.
It's like a competition for the future of food.
You could say that?
That's a deep dive I would sign up for.
Me too.
But before we go swimming with the fishes, let's get back to this whole thing about reusing wastewater in hydroponics.
Okay.
It seems like a big advantage, but something tells me it's not as easy as it sounds.
You're right. It's not as simple as watering your tomato plants with used dishwater.
Right, because, ooh.
Exactly, but you've hit on a crucial aspect of sustainable hydroponics. Reusing wastewater.
Okay.
This paper by Sutar and colleagues from 2018 looked at using treated wastewater to give nutrients to hydroponic systems.
That makes a lot of sense. We're already trying to find ways to reuse wastewater in other areas, so why not for growing food?
Exactly. It's about closing the loop.
So did it work?
This research showed some really promising results. The plants grew well and the yields were good.
That's awesome. We reduce waste and grow more food at the same time.
Precisely.
But I'm sure there are some challenges too.
Of course.
Like, how do we know that the wastewater is clean enough to grow food safely? I don't want any surprises in my salad.
That's a valid concern, and there are strict regulations about using wastewater in agriculture for that very reason.
Makes sense.
This paper emphasized that proper treatment and monitoring are key to making sure the crops are safe and high quality.
So it's complicated.
It's a complex process that needs expertise and careful management.
Which brings us back to that whole thing about needing technical know-how.
Exactly. Hydroponics might be getting easier for people to use, but it's still a science.
Right. It's not like we're just playing in the dirt anymore.
Exactly.
And speaking of the science behind it, I found that deep dive into hydroponic systems in the book Plant Factory, Using Artificial Light. So interesting.
What did you find so fascinating?
It really gets into the details of nutrient solutions, pH levels, lighting all the stuff that makes plants grow in a controlled environment.
It's like a cookbook for hydroponics.
Right. But instead of flour and sugar, you're working with nitrates and phosphates.
Exactly. And just like a chef needs to understand how different ingredients work together, a hydroponic farmer needs to master the nuances of those elements to create the perfect growing conditions.
It's a balancing act.
It is.
But it's not just about following a recipe, is it?
What else is there?
There's an art to it, too.
Explain.
Like understanding the specific needs of each plant and adjusting the system as you go.
Absolutely. It's about observation, intuition, trial and error.
So you can learn as you go.
Exactly. You can develop your green thumb even if you're not actually growing in soil.
I love that.
It's a rewarding experience.
And that's why I'm so curious about this simplified hydroponics idea you included in the research.
Simplified hydroponics.
Yeah, specifically this paper by Bradley and Morolanda in Acta Horticulturae.
Interesting. What do they have to say?
It seems like a way to bridge the gap between traditional farming and this more high-tech hydroponics approach.
I see where you're going with this.
So tell me more about it. What is simplified hydroponics?
Essentially, it's about using hydroponic models that are less complicated and need less specialized equipment.
So it's like hydroponics for beginners.
You could say that the idea is to make it less intimidating for small-scale farmers and even home gardeners who might be put off by the more complex setups.
That's fantastic. It's like the difference between gourmet cooking and using a slow cooker.
I like that analogy.
Both can make a great meal, but one is definitely easier for the average person.
And that's the beauty of making this technology more accessible.
And that's what's so cool about these deep dives.
What's that?
We're not just looking at the latest science and technology, we're also thinking about how these innovations can actually solve problems and make life better for people. And speaking of making a difference,
Yeah.
I keep thinking about how hydroponics could impact cities socially and economically.
In what way?
We've talked about the good things for the environment,
Right?
but what about bringing fresh local food to cities?
Yeah, that's an important aspect of this whole thing.
Right.
Hydroponics could actually help with a bunch of problems cities face.
Like what?
Creating jobs, giving people better access to healthy food, making cities less reliant on food being shipped in from far away.
We could even turn those abandoned lots into farms.
Exactly, turning concrete jungles into green spaces.
That's a great visual.
Right. This study in the Journal of Cleaner Production from 2019 talks about how hydroponics fits into creating a more sustainable and fair urban environment. It's not just about the technology itself, it's about how it impacts the social and economic parts of a city.
So it's like a holistic approach.
Exactly. And it's not just theoretical either.
Really?
This article you sent about hydroponic farms in Kenya, published in Renewable Agriculture and Food Systems, shows how this technology is already helping communities and making food more secure in developing countries.
That's really inspiring.
It is.
It shows how adaptable hydroponics is to different places and needs all over the world.
Exactly.
It's incredible how this technology can be a force for good, like fighting poverty, hunger, and helping the environment.
It has a lot of potential.
But we have to be realistic, too.
Of course.
It's not a magic solution that's going to fix everything.
One thing is.
We still need to figure out if we can do it on a large scale.
Right.
And if it's actually affordable and accessible for everyone.
Those are important considerations.
This paper you sent about whether hydroponics makes sense financially in developing countries, published in Land Use Policy, really gets into the money side of things.
And what's the takeaway?
It's not just about the initial cost of setting everything up.
There are always more costs.
Right. You also have to factor in operating costs, access to markets, and the need for ongoing technical support.
It gets complicated.
It does. So technology alone isn't the answer.
It's only part of the equation.
Exactly. We need collaboration, innovation, and a deep understanding of the social, economic, and environmental factors to make it work.
I couldn't agree more.
It's about finding those solutions that are good for people and the planet.
Yeah.
Can't just focus on one or the other.
A holistic approach is key.
Well said. Okay, so today's deep dive has taken us from soil erosion to amazing tomato farms, from cannabis to the possibility of transforming cities.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. What was the most interesting thing you found in all this research?
For me, it's clear that hydroponics has the potential to completely change how we grow food.
Right.
But like we've been saying, it's not a magic solution. It's a powerful tool that needs to be used carefully and thoughtfully.
And that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating.
Definitely.
There's so much room for growth and discovery.
I see what you did there.
Speaking of which, I wanted to mention this suggestion for more research that really caught my eye.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
This paper in Energy's 2023 talks about comparing hydroponics to other innovative methods like aquaponics and aquaculture.
So, kind of a head-to-head.
Exactly. Imagine what we could achieve if we combine these different approaches.
The possibilities are endless.
They really are. But for now, we've reached the end of our hydroponics adventure.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It really does. We've covered a lot of ground today, or should I say a lot of water.
I like it.
You've given us a lot to think about, from how hydroponics affects the environment to its potential to change society and the economy.
It's a multifaceted issue.
So tell me, what will you grow with all this new knowledge?
That's a great question.
Thanks for exploring the incredible world of hydroponics with us on the Deep Dive.
It's been my pleasure. Keep those sources coming and those minds curious, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic you care about. Until then, keep exploring.